I'm a strong believer in building the right team for the right task. To give you an example, if we have a surveillance operation that's running and the target or the subject regularly frequents five-star establishments, Dorchester Hotel, top-end restaurants, you want to build the team that are dressed appropriately, that are going to go in and monitor that individual and capture the evidence that's required for the case. So you need to build the right team for that. Now, if you had a green OP or a task where you needed to put someone in a field for a week to be self-sufficient, to be covertly placed and to monitor a site for illegal fly tipping or for a particular reason, then maybe guys with that military special forces type background would have better, say, skill sets than an investigator from a financial background.
Hello and welcome to the Intelligence Advantage podcast, where we talk to the movers and shapers in the investigation and intelligence space. My name is Gary Miller. I've been an investigative lawyer for nearly half a century, and I'm also the chairman of the IFG, a network of international investigative and asset recovery lawyers. Today, I'm thrilled to be joined by a really good buddy, Mike La Corte, who's been in the business for over 25 years, and looking at him now, he's got at least another 25 years to go. Mike is the current president of the Association of British Investigators and has served 3 successive terms as president of the World Association of Detectives, and is also one of the most entrepreneurial private investigators that I know. So welcome, Mike. It's really a pleasure to have you on board.
Thank you, Gary. Pleasure to be here. Looking forward to our conversation. One point, I was I was president of the World Association of Detectives and then served as 3 consecutive terms as chairman.
As chairman. I knew I'd get something wrong somewhere. It was only 3 lines, Mike, so I'm sure I would screw it up somehow. Anyway, I want to just start off with an understanding of what drew you into the world of corporate investigation. Was it something that was it in your family blood? Was it in your genes? Or was it something in your education or work experience? How did you get to this place?
Okay. I suppose I am going back when I started, came into the industry in quite a unique way. It's a first career for me, whereas back then when I started, a lot of the industry was filled with second and third career individuals. What I mean by that is people in public service or in the military or in the intelligence services would come towards the end of their career and then transition into the private sector.
And in fact, these days, you will often find people in your business that have been in customs, excise, in the police. So you are, in that respect, actually part of a minority group.
Exactly right. So, and it was tough and challenging initially. So I graduated from college, from university with in business and finance, and then I moved into the world of security, and I'd done a couple of security close protection courses, and it wasn't for me. It wasn't something I particularly enjoyed. But on one of the courses, I met a couple of interesting chaps with some government careers, previous government careers, and now in the sort of private sector, and I got involved and exposed into this group that were training people that were coming out of the special forces into private sector investigating. And I went on these courses and got exposed to this, I would say back then, not commonly known world network circuit of independent specialists, risk consultants, investigators that would, service a lot of the Big 4 companies that are out there providing intelligence work. And that was my journey into this network, pretty closed network back then, whereas now the entry into the market's slightly different. There's MVQ level 3, there's skills for justice, there's some more training. As you know, we're in an unregulated, unlicensed industry at the moment for the private sector. So having individuals choose professional private sector investigating as a career back then was a little bit different than it is now.
Sorry, just 1 second. Does that particular group that looked after, that helped ex-SAS or special service move into the private sector. Does it still exist, or is it proliferated and there's hundreds of them?
There's a lot of more training providers out there now.
I see.
Back then, it was that most of the guys on the course had a background in, say, special forces or some type of military career, and it was the skills that you developed in that previous life, transitioning those into the private sector. And it was fascinating for me back then, Gary. I was always, quite inquisitive in terms of learning. And then I jumped on the circuit, and I was doing all types of investigative work. And back then, a lot of the work actually is on the ground training. So working with guys that are a lot more seasoned, a lot more experienced, and understanding operationally what to do and how to do it, exposed me into this investigation world. And then come across the professional associations, which from back then till now, I'm still very actively involved in. And through professional associations, as you know, in any industry, you build a network of experts. That I joined the Association of British Investigators as a young investigator, took relevant investigation courses and expanded my knowledge, not only from the field work that I used to do, which I'm not actively participating anymore in, become a little bit more out there, but learn about all the other components that form a strategic investigation. And that was how I started my journey many, many years ago. And I speak to young investigators coming into the market now with a wide variety of backgrounds. You've got bankers, people with legal experience, journalists. It's a lot more open now because there are a variety of skill sets that make a well-rounded investigator, not just what you've learned maybe in the police and the military.
And do you get many applicants from the police force and from SAS and places like that, or not so many?
So we generally do receive quite a few CVs from guys that are retiring from public service, and that these are the guys that have had excellent careers and looking to come into the private sector as a second, third career to finish off before retiring. So,
right.
And these guys bring different skills to the table because they've been there, seen it and done it in terms of strategic investigation work. But what I'm interested in is the younger ones coming through with a different outlook, a different skill set, maybe more in tune. Some are more in tune with the technology advancements that have gone on.
Right.
Have a little bit of variety in terms of life skills, because bringing that to the table, forming part of a strategic investigation team, is really important.
Absolutely. And looking back now at the training you had in these various bodies, what was the most useful that you can think of that you thought, even today, I think about those basic principles of investigation? Can you think of anything?
I think it's difficult. Our industry moves super quick, and
right.
if not kept up to date with the new nuances and technology advancements or databases or tools, then you fall behind straight away. So
sure.
And for any investigator to say you've got your finger on the pulse in terms of every little thing that's going on, no. I find it hard to believe.
But let's just take an example of surveillance, because notwithstanding drones and electronic things, which bring with them a huge risk profile, physical surveillance is still sometimes a really important part of an investigative job. Do you think the techniques have changed very much since you started?
I think the basics stay the same in terms of how agents conduct themselves, but technology now can make the surveillance agents' routine and job a lot. If you can leverage technology that's out there, it's going to make the job a little bit more easier. But in terms of I think it's made it easier with the leveraging that we have in terms of the kit that's available. I mean, back then I remember having to talk entries into dictaphones and then take notes and prepare reports. Now there's a lot more tools out there that enable you to capture evidence a little bit more discreetly and quickly, whereas before there was a lot more labor intensive. But if you're talking about the principles, I think the principles remain the same. It's leveraging what's around the modern world to help how you conduct yourself as an investigator.
And what about obviously preparing somebody for an infiltration or some kind of confrontation in if it's SAS, etc. In some senses, that obviously I can see how that is a really valuable skill in terms of being calm under pressure. But do you think people that have been in and served in active forces make good investigators, or do they actually long for that confrontation?
So as an investigator, one thing you should try and avoid is confrontation, especially
Yeah, absolutely.
with subject, target, or anyone else for that matter. But I'm a strong believer in building the right team for the right task. To give you an example, if we have a surveillance operation that's running and the target or the subject regularly frequents five-star establishments, Dorchester Hotel, top-end restaurants, you want to build a team that are dressed appropriately, that are going to go in and monitor that individual and capture the evidence that's required for the case. So you need to build the right team for that. Now, I'm going to generalize, but it doesn't mean that everyone with a special forces background wouldn't be appropriate for a five-star hotel. I'm not saying that. I'm saying that you need to build the right team that would be appropriately dressed, that would walk in and blend in straight away. If you had a green OP or a task where you needed to put someone in a field for a week to be self-sufficient without, to be covertly placed and to monitor a site for illegal fly tipping or for a particular reason, there may be guys with that military special forces type background that can deal with potential, that can keep themselves concealed and covert for a prolonged period of time, and dealing with the random matters that pop up, like someone walking their dog, a stray dog, and how to keep themselves protected from these risks while staying covert, would have probably more better, say, skill sets than an investigator from a legal background or from a financial background. So
that's a good question. How many applicants do you get from the legal fraternity? Not many?
Not a huge. We've had a few interested lawyers that, maybe want a career type change. But I think we've got a lawyer on retainer here anyway, but I think having someone with legal knowledge of the processes is super important for an investigator and for an investigation team.
Would that be more in the sense of a compliance function rather than, I tend to feel that we lawyers are risk averse, and we all know in the game of investigation, you have to understand where that gray area is. You need to know the black and the white, but you also need to know where that gray area is. And I'm not sure lawyers make the best on the ground investigators, but you tell me.
I think the most important point between investigator and lawyer is keeping that communication open, that transparency in terms of case strategy. There will be legal solutions available during the course of an investigation that investigators can take advantage of. For example, if a subject is going to become aware that there's potential litigation, service of documents, or he's put on notice, then that could be a pinch point opportunity for the investigation team to leverage more information. Maybe that might be an idea of putting the target under a period of surveillance to see what happens after he's been served legal documents. Does he go and see other individuals that are involved in the fraud or matter? Does he go and see other advisors that have not been brought to light yet? So what I'm saying is opportunity, case strategy, and having that open relationship with the legal team, for me, is the most important part of that process.
Right.
And, investigators tend to, you're talking about the grey, tend to look for opportunities.
Yes.
And in every case, there will be these opportunities that come across. And how do we leverage? How do we take advantage legally, ethically, compliantly, of course? But how do we use that? And having this open communication with lawyers who are experts like yourself at case strategy is the important part of the process.
But I think understanding our respective limitations, and also, of course, we are officers of the court. Anyway, I don't want to get stuck in there because you and I could have a program, a podcast alone on the question of duties and responsibilities and ethical boundaries. I'm going to come back to ethics in a while, but one thing you mentioned that was interesting is the fact that, of course, you're doing, or in the course of doing an investigation, you're often trailing people into hotels and other establishments. How does the hotel, obviously, if you're doing it properly, nobody knows you're anything other than having a cup of tea. But have there ever been situations that you can recall, whether amusing or not so amusing, where somebody has asked you to move along, sir, or something has shown out in the course of an investigation? Or am I talking to the wrong person in the sense of none of your people ever get caught?
Again, it depends. Every case is graded. So when you put it, if you're talking about specifically surveillance and you're monitoring someone in an establishment and it's important, I mean, we need to understand the objective. What we're trying to achieve here. Do we need to know whether Mr. X is meeting any other associates? Well, if that's the objective, then if he does go into an establishment, we need to go in, because if we wait outside for him, there's no benefit. We're just burning through a budget for no reason. So an investigator will go in, and if Mr. X is meeting Mr. Y, and this is imperative to the case, because if this happens because he's under a non-compete, or he's on a gardening leave contract, or whatever the legal situation is, and we need to document evidence of those two together, then the team will then push the boundary a little bit further in order to capture that evidence. So so it really does depend, Gary. And in that situation, the risk goes up, obviously, because he may be sitting in a quiet corner that nobody would walk past with a covert camera. So you may have to make, and this is where an experienced investigator will make a call on the ground and say, right, this is the objective. We need to get this. We need to get this now. So, and someone will go and do it, and that will raise the risk. But the risk is there. It's a calculated risk. And if it doesn't come off, well, but we've got the evidence for the case.
Yeah, I think that's a really important point that I don't think enough lawyers or investigators actually articulate to clients. But I don't think clients really, some of them don't want to hear, of course, but many of them are not told that what we do, you do, is really at the outer edges of legal practice. 99.9% of what lawyers do and businessmen do doesn't come anywhere near the risk profile in terms of possibility of getting in trouble or blowing the whistle on something that people want to keep covert. So it's really important that investigators tell the lawyers, and if it's direct to the client, these are the risks and these are the consequences of the risks. How do you go about that with clients?
Well, you need to be transparent. It's not only advising of the risk and the reasons what investigation steps and options are available. It's also managing the client's expectations, because clients have if they're not used to instructing investigators before, they have this perception of what's possible and what they believe is achievable. And if you don't and I've seen this historically, if you don't manage the client's expectations from the beginning, you are going to put yourself in an area where you're going to probably overpromise and underdeliver, or have the client believe that you've got this magic mystery crystal ball that you can do these crazy things that, well, actually, in reality, you can't. These are the options that are available to us, and this is proportionate to your case. These tools, these investigation steps that we advise to do are proportionate to the case. So if ever it does get compromised, we have conducted the privacy impact assessment. We've got legitimate interest to investigate, and we can defend our corner. And that's the most important part. So equally, the risk, what the investigator does is important, but also managing the client's expectations.
So what's the weirdest request that you've had that you can remember in terms of a potential job?
God, what a question. Weirdest, I mean,
or the most notable. What comes out and you think if Chloe, your daughter, if she turned around and said, "Dad, give me an example of some really notable and either interesting, funny, complex investigation."
Yeah. Okay. So let's go for, say, I mean, funny. We have a variety of inquiries that come through, and you grade them, right? One, you've got to make sure that the person is corpus mentis, that the request is legitimate, really. And this has been post-COVID. We've had quite a lot of inquiries where individuals suspect that they are being targeted and listened to both internally, and whether there's anything we can do in terms of checking their physical self for any illicit monitoring devices. And that's out there, I think. So
wow. So why do you think? Because people have just become more nervous by being cooped up? Is that it?
Potentially. I think there's a lot of information out there as well, Gary. So we've had a few of those where people think, I think I'm being targeted by a whoever that's, pushing the way I think, or listening to what I do, or monitoring everything I say. And that's borderline potentially paranoia, maybe some issues, some other issues. So,
Yeah.
you treat those inquiries with again, the layered respect that they deserve until the point it comes that,
And what percentage of those actually turn out to be true, that they are being monitored?
Well, we had one that did turn out to be true, and it went as far as the individual installed a Faraday cage in their basement. It was an affluent area in London, and they're allegedly being monitored via a variety of ways through microwave technology and some other technology that I'm not fully understand. But they reported to the police. We actually provided a report of unrecognized and inaccurate frequencies, and that was provided to the police, and the police ended up engaging with the individual. This was after the individual reported the matter several times. So they were, suffering from headaches and suffering from other conditions, and installed a Faraday cage which blocks transmission in their piece. So you're talking about, a sort of high net worth individual with these types of issues being targeted by.
And what is it? What? I mean, we see it on the movies, but how much would I have to pay if I wanted to say to Mike, right, I want you to install a Faraday cage in my basement? How much would that cost me?
Oh, I mean, it depends, Gary. You can make them Faraday safe. I wouldn't put a cash money on it
figure on it. But is it expensive? Yeah. Is it a real?
Yeah, it's not. Yeah, it's not
cheap.
No,
not cheap.
Right. Yeah.
And in this particular case, it was actually proven, or obviously, I don't want you to name names, that he was being targeted.
So there were foreign frequencies, microwave frequencies that were detected when the technical team went in with their sweep equipment. They conducted a full review, and that report was sent to the police, and then the police took some action. They got more actively involved. They had something tangible rather than an individual saying, look, I'm suffering from headaches, I've got these issues and whatever else. So I've taken these measures. Can you please look at this further?
That's fascinating. Of course, when something like that happens, just shooting the breeze with you, it's all very well going down into your Faraday cage and you put your PC in there, you put your phone. But of course, we can't live in a Faraday cage for the whole of our lives. So we're taking our phones, maybe our PCs, but okay, maybe not. As soon as we walk out of the cage with our phones, we're vulnerable again. So although I suspect, knowing nothing about this, I'm just really spitballing here, that when you're walking around with your telephone, the chances of you actually getting, maybe wrongly, but I think the chances of you getting headaches and stuff from being targeted may be reduced. I don't know. But certainly, you and I have I have heard of devices that as long as you're physically proximate, you can pick up something from somebody's phone.
Well, again, you're talking about tech and the tools that are available that move very quickly. You're right. There are some tools out there that can harvest open data from devices. There are,
Right.
not that any reputable investigator will go down those
Yeah.
lines, but those tools, you know, if you look hard enough, you probably find something that
Find
can do something.
something. And can you give me an example of an investigation, whether it's with tech or not, that was particularly successful in the sense of, because of your input, somebody either was saved from maybe being kidnapped and you found out where they were and you managed to get them out, or somebody had lost something super valuable and as a result of your work, they had recovered the family heirloom or bonds or whatever. Give me an example of where you added the Conflicts International fairy dust.
Well, the client came to us. He was being blackmailed by a group for quite a big, substantial amount of money. I mean, morally, he's a very successful businessman. He was quite, in the sort of twilight years. Ended up having a mistress, and that got exposed. And he was being blackmailed that if you don't pay X amount of million, this will be shared with your family and your wife. He ended up having IVF and had children with the mistress as well. So there's a whole complex type case. So he called us in. We went in. We sort of started the investigation. We conducted some technical sweep. We found out that his mistress's computer has hacked, and there were some photos on there, and that's where they ended up getting the information from. And anyway, he was in a bit of a bad way, this chap, and he wanted to pay. He called us in order to pay the blackmailers so they could go away. And we said, well, that's not the advice we want to give you, to be honest with you. So let's find out who they are. Blackmail's a criminal offence. Let's see what legal tools are available. And let's get behind and understand what's going on first before we make any decisions. So, these blackmailers were pretty good, to be honest with you, Gary. They would leave printed evidence on his car, on his work, staple them to his business address at his work. So when the staff would come in, they'd see a picture of him with another woman and whatever. So slowly increasing the blackmailing threat to unveil the truth. Came in and sat down with you guys, and the case strategy was mapped out. We ended up identifying who they were, and it was not a very nice group of individuals. They ended up in the RCJ, and we gave evidence, and the guy, we had the police involved as well. So it was quite a well-rounded attack type case. But in the end, what happened was the blackmailer who had, and I've got to be very careful here in terms of, I don't want to disclose too much, but he ended up having to leave the UK.
Right.
And there was other charges involved. I think 7 to 10 years is the penalty for blackmail.
Was there any question in that case of the mistress being involved?
Yeah, so great question, and it's exactly what came up with us initially early on. And the mistress was part of a network of, and she was retired, but working girls, and but an elderly one, not elderly in terms of working, but not elderly in terms of being elderly. And she came to the end of her working career and was now with
this person. Yes.
Yeah. She led a lovely. I think there was a bit of jealousy involved with her group of friends because she landed on her feet with a high net worth individual that would shower her with a very nice lifestyle, and that's how it all unfolded. There was quite a bit more to this case, and it ran on for some time. We ended up liaising with Westminster Council for CCTV. We applied for those under the DPA. So there was a lot of moving parts of great investigation work, great covert field work, excellent legal strategy work, and identifying the individuals involved. And that case provided a satisfactory solution to the client's problem, even though if you think about why we were instructed in the first place, morally, what he was doing was wrong, right? But we can't tell clients how to live their lives. What we can do is provide advice and give them advice and guidance in the situation that they're facing currently. And that's exactly what we did. But that case was nominated for Investigator of the Year for WAD in Bucharest in 2017. And I managed to win that Investigator of the Year award because of that particular case. And that is one of, a great strategy type case where we were continuously talking. The shift was continuously changing. There was a lot of move, and we had to stay 3 or 4 steps ahead of the game. But yeah, that's when it works well, Gary.
And the client who as just for full disclosure, it wasn't my case. So, but the client ended up having protected, for him, it was important, his secret life with the mistress. That continued, or because it all got blown up and her role in it, that, as far as you know, what happened? Nothing, something?
My advice was disclose this to your wife straight, because that's the leverage they have, right? When you remove the leverage, the blackmail starts to fall apart. And this was whilst we identified who the individuals were behind the case. So we put ourselves in a strategic, strong position as quickly as possible. So once you remove the leverage and you've identified the third parties behind it, then automatically you're holding more of the cards now. And it's utilizing expert legal advice. And what you can't do, and as you know, is use the authorities as a tool. So you either report it to the police, let them run with it, let them do what they've got to do, but there's no anonymity here. The police are there to uphold the law, not to protect your name. So, and that's where the legal team became involved with anonymized court orders and what have you. So this didn't become public. Now, removing the other risk, which was the wife not knowing anything. Well, if she does know, then that leverage is removed. So it was going through those steps, and we don't know how it's going to unfold at the beginning. You're faced with a problem. You're trust but verify in terms of investigators. You don't know where you are initially for the first few weeks, and those are the most important. And once you find your feet and you gather the right information and knowledge, you can make the next step decision.
And was there any particular technique, and applying for the CCTV is clever, that enabled you to identify who they were? Or was it good gumshoe, following them back to a place, taking a photo? I don't know whether you were able to use facial recognition or anything like that. Was there something that would be interesting to share regarding that?
Yeah, there were, back then, this was 2016, 17, no facial recognition software was then. We put the client, his vehicles and any known locations under covert counter surveillance. So anyone who attempted to approach anything that he owned, and his car was parked in an underground car park at one of the sort of surveillance positions, someone turned up with an envelope and put it underneath the windscreen. That was the initial lead. We took him away, identified who he was. He was then followed and built up a network. That, with the hack on the computer, some of the data on there, we were able to try and link pieces back together. And then, we actually ended up speaking to a couple of them as well under some, under a cover, which helped us join the dots in terms of what was happening and why. These guys, all they were interested in was money. That was, there was nothing else to it.
Were they leveraging the mistress? Had they, in other words, if she had been left on her own, given human behavior, who knows what would have happened, but it is unlikely that this would have blown up in the same way. These guys or these people, might have been women involved, decided to take the opportunity of squeezing the mistress.
So they initially approached the mistress and then approached him. And when he was made aware of it, his first reaction was to pay. He's a pretty well-known businessman. Pay, make this go away. How much? Was she? My point was she first reluctant? Did she not want to get involved, or was this her end game all along? Do you think? I think this was probably her end game. She was cashing in, right?
Everyone looks for a payday, right?
Retirement.
Sadly. And there must be cases, we were just talking about, we're not judges of morality. We're here to uphold the law. We do have ethical considerations and we have to think about them. Apart from that case, which is not really a strain on your own individual ethics, at the end of the day, if somebody is having an affair, they're having an affair. It's maybe if you were in a tight-knit religious community and there were just other ramifications, I don't know. But just thinking out loud, has there ever been a situation where you've been working for a client and you've come across something that they are doing which is more than just borderline unlawful or doing something that is reprehensible, and you've had to make a decision as to whether to continue or to reveal or to report to the police? I don't know, something like that, where you've been in a bit of a dilemma.
Again, what we like is if it's a case that is going to get where there's evidence being prepared for court, we like to be instructed through a legal team. So we not work for the client directly. Having a legal privilege layer in place helps protect the parties involved. So our reports, information will go to the legal team, whether it's in-house or external, and continue that moving forward. So sometimes during the course of the investigation, there may be things that we're not told for whatever reason. So we would share everything with the legal team and keep that going. If we find something out that the clients haven't disclosed to the legal team and we find that out, then we would share that with the legal team. So if that needs to be reported to an external authority because of whatever breach, whether there's a regulatory breach or something even more severe than that needs to go to the authorities because there's potential a criminal element, then that would be the legal team's decision, Gary. We would, and that's why I like to put that legal layer in place between us.
Makes sense.
Ryan.
Makes sense. Has that ever happened? I mean, I've faced it a few times where somebody like you has come back and said, look, we've discovered this. What do we do? And on occasion, I've had to say, you have to withdraw and I have to withdraw. So it does happen. Let's move on to the question that always interests me, is people that have had the most impact on you as a human being, as a investigator. Who have been your mentors or gurus and why?
I think I mean, obviously I'm going to go back to my father as my primary mentor. That my father moved from Sicily at a young age, at 16, to come to UK because of the way that the challenges of work back then. And so I've seen.
So if you told me, Mike, that you were born of Sicilian blood, I would have been a lot more cautious in dealing with you, my friend. Only teasing.
So yeah, my dad's from Italy and my mother's from Spain. So I've got quite a mixed background, which actually both those language during my career has actually helped me quite a lot in my investigation career. But sure. But both my parents came to the UK from a young age and started here under tough circumstances. And my father always instilled values and hard work. And I would say he would be my primary mentor in terms of character. And then throughout your career, you try and latch on, or you try and seek people a generation or two older than you to guide you in the right way. And you people by people, and you're only as strong as your network. And there's been numerous over time, Gary, and all from a variety of walks of life. And I think if you've got the right values, grounded values from growing up, I think you develop yourself as you continue in your career. And I've been quite, lucky in the people that I have that have touched my life, and there's been numerous, have enabled me to keep moving forward. I'm not finished yet, nowhere near. So no. This is it's important.
This is just the beginning. So we've moved into another super technological advancement period. Are you excited about the future in the investigation industry and what you and your colleagues can achieve with, I don't know, everyone mentions, of course, AI, but anything else that is evolving?
Yeah, I think things are moving so quick, and every investigator is tripping over themselves to try and stay up to date in terms of how to leverage AI, the impact of AI, how come. And I think it's too early to make any strong decisions in terms of how it's going to impact the investigation world. I think we all think it's going to make us process lots of data quicker, maybe reduce the amount of wasted hours and make us a little bit more efficient. But all the investigators will do is everyone's going to have the same tools. Is how do you make where's your USP with all these tools that are out there? There's all these tips, tricks, models available. What makes you different? What makes you different as an investigator with the way that the technology is moving at a rapid rate? So I think hopefully, and I say this to my team all the time, don't try and solve a case from your desk. Yeah, the newer ones coming in will try and trace an individual, do an asset report or whatever the background report from their desk without going out and speaking to people. I think you can't take away some of the interpersonal speaking to individuals, neighbors, interviews, making inquiries. You can't remove that from your toolbox because of the way the technology is working. And I think when I started, a lot of the work was done on the ground. Now it's becoming less and less and less. And I think as the generations become more involved with the access to the amount of data that's out there, and I've seen it myself firsthand, a lot of the guys try and close a case quickly from their desk without verifying sources on the ground. So hopefully the generations to come don't forget how maybe we used to do it back in the day.
Okay. So talking about USP, or as I call it, fairy dust, what is Mike La Corte's USP? Think of you describing yourself to somebody about why somebody should select you as opposed to anyone else.
Sure. So I think my niche is actually now, because of the associations and networks I've developed over nearly 30 years, is having trusted, screened service level agreement agents in jurisdictions around the globe. So being able to react quickly and provide solutions in multiple jurisdictions simultaneously. That's my USP. I've fallen into the international investigation world through the associations and developing trusted relationships with people that would handle my case like it was their own. And I know for yourself, Gary, with the International Fraud Group, you've developed an excellent network there as well. And that's the same for me as an investigator, because no one has an agent in every city around the world, no matter who you are, right? You're as strong as your network, and you need to have trusted guys that are not going to do something that's gone way over the line, that's going to put us all into trouble.
And talking about the industry that you live in is broad, wide, they're a one-man band. Have you been approached ever by the big boys? Say, come and join us, Mike. You've got a really, thriving business. You know what you're doing. You're a blah, blah, blah. Come and join the big boys.
Good question. Maybe 5 years ago, we had a knock on the door. I think it was when I was in the chair at the WAD.
Right.
And it wasn't the right time. I had a lot of fire in my belly, Gary, so, and I still do. I'm still at the sharp end. I love what I do. So I don't know. Was approached a few years ago. Is it something for the future? Probably. Everyone needs an exit, I suppose. But yeah. Everyone knows everyone as well in this industry. It's like, it's very connected in a way.
There has been a movement recently where I can understand the reluctance to be bought, because it's really difficult to get the right balance between being an equal partner as opposed to being subsumed by the big boys and then simply becoming somebody else's employee, which nobody who's run their business wants to do. And now people are looking at, well, if I'm not going to sell for all those reasons, why don't we get some PE investors? And Does that sound attractive to you? And does it, from your experience, does it work?
So I've had colleagues that have gone through both the buyout earn-out route and the PE route. It can work. It depends on the PE house you're dealing with, I suppose, and how flexible and accommodating and what restrictions are put in place. But I think it can. Both parties need to be committed and need to push to make it work. If you're put under too much of a performance, financial, or even freedom constraint in terms of what you can do within your own business, then it's set up for disaster. If you're doing it for the right reasons, because you've hit a ceiling and you want to maybe leverage what the PE house can bring to the table, then I suppose it can work. And if you can cross and upsell some of your services with other people in the group as well, it can work. But I've heard some horror stories, Gary, so as well as with all these things.
Have you heard of any success stories? Is there any business you can name and say, that PE investment worked for the PE house and it's working for the investigation outfit?
I could name, but I don't know whether it's appropriate.
Oh, we're not sure whether it's been made public, because sometimes the PE investors are not. I got it. So, and in that case, then let's not name names, but just let's talk about size, etc., and how long ago and what you've seen. Just for your assessment, since they went this route, have you seen what kind of change, improvement, advancement, expansion of the investigation house?
Yes, because if a PE house makes a decision to commit, then they're investing in the individuals and the business. So there will be money there for maybe a more robust marketing strategy, because that forms, a primary component in any type of business model there is. So there would be a lot more, say, budget committed to that, a lot more strategy committed to that, and you can take a little bit more, and this term's used loosely, a little bit more of a gamble if you've got a PE house behind you, because you say, look, guys, this is my projection, this is my plan, we want to hit this market. They'll front most of the money up. So, your gamble, if you've got your small independent business, like us, for example, or independent, we take a sizable risk gamble into an investment in a new jurisdiction. It doesn't work. Well, we're just paid for that. Whereas if you've got a PE house behind you and you've probably got more probability in making it successful, because you can take a little bit more of a risk as long as the PE house is on side. And that's what's happened to a friend of mine, colleague in the industry, has done very well, and now looking for the next wave of money, and the only downside is you are accountable, and it depends on that level of accountability to the board.
And also accountability, yes, and then the most common word that you and I hear in relation to PE is the 4-letter word exit. It's very rare to find a PE house who just says, I'd like a chunk of your business because it adds accrual income to my profit and loss or balance assets on my balance sheet. They have a 3 or 5 year exit plan. And of course, it doesn't necessarily mean you have to exit in terms of the business they've invested in. It means they have to exit and replace themselves. You and I know examples of investigation outlets that have had multiple successive investments because people see it as useful at that time. But a lot of them will not necessarily do that. A lot of them will say there has to be a sale of the whole business, and that puts an extra pressure on people, doesn't it?
That's right. And this has happened to someone else I know. There's some of the PE houses look for a model to think, right, once we hit X amount, we're selling. So, and depending on the EBITDA of each individual business, they may acquire 3 or 4 smaller businesses just because they know they're going to get a better multiple when they exit after this 3 or 5 year term. So you could, if you've not thought it out properly, like you just said, put yourself in this journey where you're still hungry in your career, you're still progressing, but all of your IP, all the client base that you've built have just been dissolved in a bigger group, and then you've got to start again. So these are all these risks. And,
the major asset of your business, as with legal business, is the client, the names of the clients and the relationships. In fact, even the names of the clients has got limited value if it's not being serviced and worked by a Mike or a John or a Bill or a Fred, correct?
Correct. And also all the contracts that you have in place. If you have reoccurring contracts, those contracts provide value. You may have some really lovely big clients, but they may only instruct 1 or 2 times a year. If you've got someone that's repeat, if you're looking after them for a particular reoccurring matter, then those provide true value.
So it's not necessarily on your to-do list for this year. We've talked about the impact on business generally. Let's move into outside. Sounds a bit bizarre, but let's move outside of work and ask you, what drives you? What are you passionate about, other than, I know you are a consummate investigator, but when you have that 30 seconds of free time, what drives you outside of being a good investigator?
As in, what do I do in terms of hobby-wise, spend my time, or
yes,
why do I do?
Yes, why do you work? Are you one of these people that works in order to live, or do you live to work and that's all you care about?
No. Again, at the moment, I've got a semi-young family, 3 daughters. So my oldest is only 12. So I've got an obligation to make sure she completes her education career. So my duties are not done, far from it. So that's why I work for the moment. And then obviously I like to try and keep myself fit. I do lots of events. I do cycling, marathon events, triathlon events. So in my spare time, and also I think the reason why I do that is it helps me think, Gary. I think in my industry and in your industry, you are a thinker. You strategize. I think about my cases all the time and have these light bulb moments at the most weirdest times when I'm doing something that's not working at all, and I'm using parts of my brain that I wouldn't necessarily be using. And I think, why didn't I think of that? So cycling I went out this morning for a couple of hours before this because I knew I'm going to be speaking to Gary Miller and it's going to be a nice, challenging conversation. So I went and I kept my freed up my mind.
Yes. So that's your passion. That's your out of work passion, cycling. It takes you into that mentally clean space where you can just focus on what your legs and maybe your arms are doing.
Exactly right.
And have any of the kids taken up your cycling passion with you or not?
No, not cycling. However, Chloe, my oldest, has started to run and she wants to do her first 10K event this year. So she's started to do that, which is good.
That is amazing. And I was going to ask, but I know part the answer to the question. Have any of your children expressed at least an interest in joining you or emulating you by going into the investigative career? I know, of course, that Chloe is thinking at least about pursuing or continuing to pursue a legal kind of career, but have any of the other girls said to you, Dad, I really dig your business. I really think about maybe being an investigator as well, or not?
So when they were younger, they used to pop in the office and help. When I say help, would do the mundane things like file receipts in date and month order, which back then they thought was really exciting. You'd never get them to do that now. But when they were 14 and 13, go into Daddy's office. And but to be honest with you, I've asked, especially even my youngest, some of the newer social media apps. How do you do that? And what can you, and they'll find things that maybe asking someone of that age, they'll do it in three seconds. Whereas, us to try and get a workaround maybe take a little longer. So they've both done a bit of work experience. Chloe's going to go into law, as you know, she recently graduated. I don't think they would take over the business in the future. I don't think that's on the cards.
On the cards.
Probably not sure whether I'd want them to as well. I don't know. It's not a job. It's a way of life.
It is a way of life. You're quite right. What about Stella, your wife? Yes.
Yes.
Would she have ever wanted to have joined you in the business? I mean, I know bringing up kids is is more than a job. You and I both know that you would rather be in the office any day of the week, if we were honest, than managing 3 kids and everything that our partners do. But would she, when you talk, I'm sure you talk to Stella as I do to Linda about the case I'm on, does she ever think, do you ever think, or she ever think that it might be cool if she joined you as Mike and partner?
So she has come to some of the nice bits. So she's come to some of the nice conferences we end up going to and whatever else. And you know, my wife, she's a Greek Cypriot. She's reads, writes fluently, and she's helped out on any Greek documents we get that we don't understand, in registry documents, whatever they are. I'll send them to her, and it's a case of, oh, do I have to? But she'll read and summarize that for me, please. What actually is it? And it's technical legal Greek that she needs to go through. So she's helped out again historically, but no, I think it's probably not the right mix for both of us to be working in the
same business.
Yeah.
And what would you have done had you not turned into investigator extraordinaire? What was the next thing that you thought, looking back, I'd love to have done that?
So again, I had the legal route in my head as well, Gary. So
okay.
I think I would have done something that requires strategic thinking. That, I think, is something that I enjoy, actually. I enjoy working out what ifs and how to get somewhere. What's the right way to get? So I think it would be, if I didn't do what I did as an investigator, I'd probably go into the legal. I probably would have gone into the legal world.
Interesting. And having now lived sometimes happily and maybe sometimes unhappily alongside grumpy old lawyers like myself saying what you can and can't and should or shouldn't do, has that changed? In other words, are you now absolutely convinced that you chose the right way, that law was not necessarily your game, or is it something that hasn't turned you off, as it were?
I think I've chose the right path. I think being what I do suits who I am. And there is lots of crossover between the investigator lawyer that interests me too. So, however, having lived through, especially the last 12 months of Chloe's study for her legal degree, has probably put me off studying the law. The books and the markers and the highlight and I thought that's intense. So the investigator gives me a little bit more of a balance, I think.
And I hear you, as they say in the classics, because not that any of my kids had any intention of going into law, but I look at the quality and the type of work that you have to do to get into the legal profession. We all say, colleagues, etc., if I was being interviewed today, I wouldn't get a job. I mean, the quality that is out there is stunning. And I'm hoping the same is the case in the investigative business, the different levels of intellect and IQ, etc. Of course, you and I know that EQ these days has always been important, but is becoming more important than IQ.
Mm-hmm. Completely. And you touched on this earlier in terms of the newer guys coming into the industry have got a completely different skill set than when I started, and bringing something completely different to the table too, which is great.
What are their expectations, the new recruits that are coming in the door? We joke in the legal industry that the first question that comes out of their mouths is, what about working at home? What about paternity leave? And there's a lot of potential kind of Mickey taking about, the young generation are a bunch of softies. They really don't know what you've got to do to get along in life. What are the expectations of people coming into your business, Mike?
I think people want things very, very quickly now compared to when I first started. I started literally from the ground up. And I think people coming in not just in my industry, I think in any industry, I think the younger generation want things super quick. Access to information is very easily available. So everyone wants to get on this life path as quickly as possible and become super successful without maybe going through the layers of hard work and heartbreak and failure and whatever else that we've all had to go through. And I think we're in a generation now where people want instant success, instant results, no matter what it is. It's dangerous.
Which, just remind me, you have set Conflicts International as a business is how old?
2008 it merged. Yeah.
So before that, did you go straight into your own business? I forgot to ask you earlier, or did you go into a company and were working under somebody else's tutelage?
Yes, I went into a company first, and then I'm out of that company, set up my own consultancy firm, and then I merged. We used the term merged, but John had his own business. He had a member of staff. I had a member of staff, pretty small back then. We just put everything in one pot, created Conflict 2008, and it's grown ever since. But yes, I was working for someone else as an operations.
Are they still in business, Mike, or who knows?
I think so. I think they moved into more security than investigations.
But they gave you a good, what kind of grounding did you get when you were?
Huge grounding. These were the ex-special forces guys.
That's who they were.
Yeah. So, and that gave me not only the grounding, the insight into this world that I think back then not many people knew existed. And even now more so, it's only clients that instruct private sector investigators, for example. It's becoming more open and accessible, but it wasn't back then,
And it's, in my view, it's still an area and an industry that is very poorly understood, probably known as well. And instinctively, people will categorize an investigator by reference to a husband and wife fidelity problem. And over certainly the last 20 years, the move has been pretty successful certainly in the States. I don't know here about people's perception, certainly boardroom acceptance of an investigator being a valuable addition to the skill set that a company needs in order to successfully both avoid risk and also to take risk. What's your sense of the acceptance level in a boardroom regarding corporate investigation?
I think if you move away from the term private investigator and either move into, say, risk advisory or professional investigation, then it becomes more accepted at boardroom level. It's another tool. The problem we have in the UK is we are unregulated at the moment. There is no license. In the US, right. There are 48 out of the 52 states require investigators to be licensed. I have a New York license, for example. I sat that test, but in the UK there isn't. So we're self-regulated. So in order to provide and prove that you're a safe pair of hands to deal with a client's problem, regardless whether they're a legal, a corporate, or a family office, how do you justify that you know what you're doing and you can not going to get anyone into trouble? So the ABI, the Association of British Investigators, recently had this GDPR code of conduct approved by the Information Commissioner's Office last October. So being a code of conduct member demonstrates to your clients that you have an understanding of processing personal data, and every investigator out there processes data. It's part and parcel of what we do. And demonstrating that you are a safe pair of hands in terms of understanding GDPR, the Data Protection Act, and going through and being a code of conduct member is a one step further in professionalizing the industry. Because at the moment, in a self-regulated industry, how does the independent member of the public, legal team or corporate select an appropriate investigator to help them with a particular case?
So do you think, I think by definition you do, that what's happened in the States is hugely useful to the investigation industry in the US, that people can go to wherever the database is and check whether Mike or Gary are licensed investigators? At least they know there's a place to go to complain. Has that has that meant that the business, for all sorts of reasons, I know that States is larger, etc., but is more acceptable to use a corporate investigator than it is in the UK?
So it makes it professionalized. If there's a license and there's a body and there's a monitoring body that, or a regulator, which we still have in the UK, it's just that with the investigators are not licensed. Yes and no. Yes, that there's a database that you can go and select an investigator that has a license. Will it stop the rogue element of the industry? They'll still be there. It's just whether they'll be able to, obtain or say their license when they're not, or obtain a license and by whatever means. It depends, doesn't it? I think raising professional standards across the industry is what we need to do.
Right. And as we're creeping close to the witching hour, and I have to let you go, even though we can carry on yapping, as we both know, for ages. What about the stresses, psychological, emotional? I've worked with you, you've always appeared to me a really level-headed guy, not super emotional, not super autistic or disconnected from life. How has the business affected you emotionally and psychologically? Have you given part of yourself to the business and sometimes it's not been successful, or to a client?
You do, Gary. That, unfortunately, that's the strain of dealing with distressed purchases and personal problems. You're dealing with someone. The information we're investigating can change the route of someone's decision making or life. I think you take that with you a little bit. So I'm sure, like yourself, you're thinking about all of the clients that you've got, especially the urgent ones that you've got on now. I mean, I'm supposed to be going on holiday tomorrow. I'll still be on comms for clients. I'll still have them call me regardless. I've sat at my Christmas Day at a family dinner, having a job running in the Middle East and answering the phone. And my wife saying, Mike, just.
What's the most kind of invasive kind of occasion that you've come across in your business where you've had to say, sorry, Stella, I know we were supposed to do this, but I've got to go there?
I remember once we had a job running in the city, and it was all the objective was to house this individual, so find out where he was living so that the legal documents could be served. Remember this clear. It was a Friday afternoon, supposed to finish work from a bank. We wouldn't be home too late. And anyway, target comes out. This is where, the team went, ended up at St. Pancras, ended up on the Eurostar, ended up in Paris. I had to phone up Stella saying, I'm really sorry, I'm not going to be home for dinner. Anyway, from there on, the guy went from Paris to Monaco, spent a few days there. So we had we were there for 4 or 5 days. So what was supposed to be a few hours turned into 3 or 4 days. So there you go. So, but that's the nature of the industry.
That is the nature of the business. Anyway, listen, even though it just shows you, it's a good example of how tolerant Stella is. You can tell her afterwards that that's how I envisage her. So I want to thank you for spending time with me, Mike. It's always a pleasure to be with you, whether in person or virtually. And thanks for sharing your stories with us. And yes, I'm really grateful. Thank you very much.
An absolute pleasure, Gary. Thank you again.
Take care. Thank you for listening. And if you enjoyed this podcast, please click and subscribe to the Intelligence Advantage podcast on Spotify and other platforms.